22 days ago, I released my updated college football playoff predictions video, and the prediction of mine that received the harshest criticism, the strongest pushback, and was by far the most unpopular was my projection that the Iowa Hawkeyes would reach the 12-team playoff in its inaugural season in 2024. Now, that's certainly a bold prediction, and any sportsbook in America would back that fact up. Iowa currently sits at plus 650 per FanDuel to reach the playoff, and there are 26 teams, including 3 group of 5 teams, that have the same or more favorable odds to reach the 12-team playoff. Many of you had a plethora of criticisms, and rightly so, of my prediction in my video that I released 22 days ago. And I imagine you have those same criticisms today. Iowa's offense was horrific, and it will take more than a year for even marginal improvement to occur. And you can't keep winning a plethora of one-score games on defense and expect to not drop a game or 2 or 3 against an inferior or similar opponent. And the Big Ten West is gone, so there's going to be a scheduling wake-up call for Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Northwestern, Illinois, and Purdue, right? We'll get into all of these criticisms, for which I think I have several effective rebuttals, my opinions on this, and in-depth analysis about why I think Iowa has a somewhat easy path to the college football playoff on this episode of College Football with Sam. Welcome back, fellow football fanatics. Before we resume this intriguing episode, please hit that like button as it helps us get into the algorithm, earn more attention, which results in more subscribers, an even stronger and more active community, and just several wonderful benefits for the college football community, for the College Football with Sam community, and yourself as well. You have more college football fans to engage with, whether they're of your fan base or a different fan base. It's always better when there's more college football fans in any given space. And also, subscribe to the channel for your own benefit and click the notification bell. That way we can achieve 20,000 subscribers sooner rather than later. Just one subscription from you, or several if you share this video around to other college football fans that you know, family or friends. It helps us get closer to that mark, because at 20,000 subscribers, I will be doing a giveaway. And any video that reaches 1,000 likes on this channel, whether it's before or after, I'll make another giveaway for the College Football 25 game. And to hit the notification bell, you just click that little bell there, and you'll get notified whenever I release new college football related content, whether it's for Iowa football, any former Big Ten West team, Big Ten East team, the former Pac-12 teams. We cover all 18 Big Ten teams here on College Football with Sam. And also comment your opinions, whether it's criticisms or support, of this idea of mine that Iowa will make the college football playoff, or at least be in the running come November, even after that Ohio State game, which I think we can all say is going to be pretty much a guaranteed loss. First, what I wanted to do is talk about the benchmarks to reach the playoff and how they relate to Iowa football. So, in order to reach the college football playoff, the committee wants to see these things. They want to look at your strength of schedule. They want to brush over your strength of record, how you performed against your strength of schedule. And also, bias is natural in humanity. It just is. It's possible to be extremely objective or close to totally objective, but never objective in the perfection sense. You can never be 100% objective. Everyone has blind spots, but some have larger or more severe blind spots than others. The committee, some days it seems like they barely have any blind spots, or they have 20/20 vision. Other times it seems like they have 20/10,000 vision, and their blind spot just is their line of sight. Like they can't see anything. They're just blind. The eye test is kind of that. Sometimes they use the eye test in, I think, a good way. Other times it is in a faulty way. At the end of the day, strength of schedule and strength of record is typically the most important factors that the committee looks at. Iowa has a weak strength of schedule. It's 17th out of all 18 Big Ten teams per FPI and 15th per Phil Steele And I include Phil Steele on here because I bought his preview magazine on a recommendation from Corn Crazed, and I think you all should buy his magazine too, of course, if you can afford it, or if that's your thing and you plan to read through most or all of it. Certainly, only if you're going to use that resource. But we're going to talk about Phil Steele a little bit more in this video, but I just wanted to bring him up. Him, FPI, and myself are in agreement. This strength of schedule is easy. It's not going to be good for the College Football Playoff Committee. It won't, because they like tougher schedules. I think in order to make the playoff, Iowa has to win 11 games or 12 games. The margin for error is razor thin. In terms of strength of record, there's only really one opportunity for Iowa to achieve a big win. That's against Ohio State. It's the only top 30 team per FPI that Iowa faces. I think that Iowa's strength of schedule is probably tougher than what FPI says, because I do have Wisconsin and Nebraska as top 25 teams, and Iowa State will be pretty good too. That'll be a good non-conference game as well. But in terms of preseason power rankings, and even in my own rankings, you move the top 30 criteria to top 25, top 15. If you move it to top 10, there's only one top 10 team unanimously on the schedule. That's Ohio State. And Iowa will definitely be an underdog in that game. Double-digit underdog. I'd pencil that in as almost a guaranteed loss unless something insane were to happen, like several turnovers for Ohio State, or Iowa's offense makes a massive leap under Tim Lester, which is possible, but I think extremely unlikely given some of the constraints they have on that side of the football roster-wise. However, they'll be favored in 11 other games. Iowa will. And Iowa has the returning production, the roster, the coaching, the habit of winning close games, the habit of creating turnovers, which winning close games and creating turnovers are viewed as non-sustainable statistics, but Iowa's a little bit of an exception to the rule in that regard, especially when it comes to turnovers forced by the defense. And also their elite special teams play year after year after year. So being favored in 11 games out of the 12 that you play certainly helps. And the eye test, last but not least, the committee loves dominant teams. They do. And Iowa is not a dominant team. I will, if there's one thing that I am more confident on than Iowa reaching the playoff, it's specifically in regards to Iowa football, or more confident than anything in relationship to Iowa football. Even my own opinion that I think their defense this year will once again be elite, it could be the best defense in the country, is the fact that they will not be dominant by the box score. They just won't. It's not how they play. But it will be impossible to keep an 11-1 Big Ten team out. It will. That could not happen. There is not a universe in which an 11-1 Big Ten team is out. It's the same thing with the SEC. An 11-1 SEC team is a lock to get in. They are, unless their one loss in an abysmally easy schedule is by 50 or 60 points, which that could even happen to Iowa against Ohio State, but Ohio State has also begun to play less dominant via the box score, more complementary football. In fact, I think Ohio State's style of play, in actuality, is more dominant than it was in the past, but not in the way that the playoff committee or most fans would think of dominance. When most people think of dominance, they think of high scoring, octane, and just drilling through your opponents fairly quickly. That's not always what dominance is, though. But again, that's a conversation, I think, for another day, another video, or maybe something we can talk about a little later. In fact, I know it's something we'll talk about later. Let's take a dive into Iowa's schedule now, through the lens of that criteria. The criteria of your strength of schedule and strength of record have to be in alignment, as in you can't lose a ton of games, that's obvious, and if you have a weaker strength of schedule, you need to win more games to be in consideration for a playoff spot. And if you're not dominant, that fact that you have to win more games if you don't have a good strength of schedule, basically win as many games as you can, and the urgency to win as many games as possible is maximized if you aren't dominant or don't have a good schedule. I mean, this is why group of 5 teams used to have to go 13-0 to even have a shot to be in the college football playoff, like Cincinnati or UCF, for example, or Houston. And you had to typically build upon previously dominant seasons to gain the respect in order to reach the playoff despite having a weaker strength of schedule or not playing the style of football that the committee likes. Ironically, Iowa's somewhat done that themselves, reaching the Big Ten championship game in 2021 and 2022. But let's take a deep dive again into Iowa's schedule. It's an easy schedule per FPI and Phil Steele. I think it's easier than most Big Ten schedules, and it's the perfect schedule for Iowa to reach the playoff. When I originally made my prediction that Iowa would reach the playoff, I thought to myself, yeah, this will probably change come August, or come the next time I think about these things, because I review my predictions pretty consistently. I want to make sure they're the most accurate, and it's also fun to guess yourself and to check yourself. But looking at this schedule, outside of that road game against Ohio State, who matches up well with Iowa on both sides of the football? Who does? I can't name any team. I can tell you that Nebraska's defense matches up well with Iowa's offense, but I can't tell you that Nebraska's offense matches up well with an Iowa defense that's legendary year after year after year, and especially this year when they're top 5 in returning production. Wisconsin, they have one of the few passing games in college football, if Tyler Van Dyke pans out, that could maybe question Iowa's secondary, that could give them some problems, more problems than what a Phil Parker defense is used to through the air. But that doesn't mean they necessarily match up well with an Iowa secondary that's far more proven than Wisconsin's passing offense. Outside of Ohio State, Iowa will be favored in all of their games, which means that losing to any of those teams outside of the Buckeyes will cripple their chances. Now, I still think it's the perfect schedule to reach the playoff, because Iowa knows how to win close games, and their amount of returning production is insane. They're top 10, factoring both offense, defense, and special teams. And Iowa's tougher non-Ohio State games are at home. Iowa State is at home. Wisconsin is at home. Nebraska is at home. Washington, who is the second toughest team on Iowa's schedule, pardon me, per FPI, they're at home, and that is going to be a long flight. The toughest road opponent for Iowa football in 2024, this will probably blow your mind. I don't have Iowa's schedule memorized. It'll either be Minnesota, Michigan State, or Maryland outside of Ohio State. You take Ohio State off the board, and I think that's appropriate because it's kind of an automatic L. They don't have another tough road game. They don't. I mean, Michigan State, Minnesota could be tough. Minnesota beat them last year. Michigan State should improve under Jonathan Smith. UCLA has talent, and that's a long flight. And Maryland has some talent. But none of those teams are preseason top 25, and they've all had their struggles over the past several seasons. They've been worse programs than Iowa has been, and they return less production as well because Iowa leads the Big Ten in returning production. Iowa's goal this year with their schedule, with what they bring back, should be to reach the playoff because of their high returning production and what is a very workable and easy schedule. Iowa could once again, like last year, win several close games and go 11-1, or with what they bring back, they could perhaps dominate this schedule outside of Ohio State, losing to Ohio State on the road, but winning most of their games in the regular season by double digits just because of how favorable this schedule is. Before we get further in the video, I want to quickly shout out my Patreon account and also my merchandise store. You can find the links to both of those in the video description or down below in the pinned comment or reply to the pinned comment. If you want to have your name featured not the beginning, that's how it used to be, but at the middle and end of every video with a shout out at the end, sign up as an All-American, Heisman, or All-Conference member. If you want bonus content, sign up as an All-American member. That's $10 a month as opposed to the $5 a month for All Conference. And if you want, in addition to all the things that the All-American and All Conference members have, if you want direct access to me in messaging, and if you want free College Football with Sam merchandise signed by me after 6 months of membership, join the Heisman Club or become a Heisman Patreon member for $25 a month. And as for my merchandise store, you can get an Iowa-themed College Football with Sam t-shirt. You can get a black or white-themed, the black one's up here on the video screen right now, or you can get a College Football with Sam t-shirt in any Big Ten school colors. You can get sweaters. You can even get a College Football with Sam mug or sticker. If that's your kind of thing, I just encourage you to check out the merchandise store through the link in the description or the pinned comment. And finally, if you want to see my specific predictions for Iowa, including just a brief roster breakdown, brief but very analytical roster breakdown, returning starter numbers, returning production numbers, specific predictions for the schedule, and also who I have Iowa matching up with in the college football playoff that I'm projecting them to make, click the link, click the info card in the top right corner of your screen and watch my Big Ten predictions video. That's the most recent video I've published that has the greatest chance of getting to 1,000 likes, so I can do that college football 25 giveaway. So head on over and do that if you could. I would appreciate that. But let's dive right back into the deep end and talk about Iowa's strengths. Iowa's strengths are as follows. Their defense. Their defense. How about you have a side of defense? The defense has been near elite or elite for most of Phil Parker's tenure. They have not allowed their defense to allow more than 20 points scored on them per game since 2015. It's nearly been a decade since Iowa's scoring defense has allowed close to 3 scoring touchdowns per game. That's insane. That's how good of a defensive coordinator Phil Parker is. He's the best defensive coordinator in all of college football, and Iowa has one of the best, if not the best, defensive staffs in all of college football. And LeVar Woods is the best special teams coach in all of college football. It's defense and special teams for the Iowa Hawkeyes. And this defense will be all-time elite, and I'm going to dive into that in its own segment of this video. But I want to keep on top of the specific strengths before talking about the defense as a whole and why I think it'll be generational. Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson make up the best linebacker room in the nation. They had 281 tackles, 6 sacks, 5 passes defended, and 3 forced fumbles last year alone. And that was with the worst offense under Kirk Ferentz in the history of Iowa. I do believe, at least. It was worse than the 2022 offense. I know that the 23 offense dealt with more injuries, but my goodness. Brian Ferentz, now an offensive analyst at Maryland. Good luck with that, Mike Loxley. He was just so bad. There's a reason why I gave him the name He Who Shall Not Be Named, because he was a disgrace to this program, to this offense, straight up. And Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson at the linebacker spot, the quarterback of the defense, commanded a defense that bent, but really outside of the Tennessee game and the Penn State game late, never broke. I mean, those are the only 2 games where Iowa's defense just totally imploded, where they broke. The Minnesota game was close, but at the end of the day, they held Minnesota to 4 field goals. And against Michigan, one of the better offenses in the country, they held the Wolverines to 26 points, stalwarted Michigan's ground attack, and if not for Michigan's generational defense, that could have been an even closer game. 26-0. Michigan always felt in the lead, but really, I mean, I'm probably rambling at this point, but that's how good this defense was. And it's going to be the same way this year because of all that they return. And then on the defensive line with Deontay Craig, Yaya Black, Aaron Graves, they're great there. and Deshaun Lee, Sebastian Castro, Germani Harris, Quinn Schulte, Xavier Nwampka, they're an elite group there. Those are the defensive line, the linebacker core, the defensive back unit. The linebackers, and I think with the DBs just closely behind, are the anchors, the strong points of this defense. The defensive line would be the weak point, but I think it's still an elite unit in college football. That's just how deep this defense is. That's how strong Iowa is on that side of the ball. If we want to talk about offensive strengths, I would say that the offensive line, the tight end room, maybe running backs, if they can be healthy, would be honorable mention strengths for this team. Same with Drew Stevens at kicker. Some weaknesses of this team. The offense. It's been so bad that its performance has been memeable since 2021, more specifically 2022. And ever since Nate Stanley left, this quarterback room has been a mess. I thought that Cade McNamara would be serviceable last year. He tore his quadricep in the preseason of 2023 in fall camp, and he wasn't the same player. And he got injured against Michigan State. Before then, he wasn't doing good, and then Deacon Hill was just a disaster. With Cade McNamara being healthy, hopefully he's healthy for the entire preseason and better this year, and then Brendan Sullivan transferring in from Northwestern, this is going to be Iowa's best quarterback room easily since they had Nate Stanley in 2019. Could be even better. It could be Iowa's best quarterback room since C.J. Beathard. McNamara was good at Michigan. He was an above-average player at the worst, good player at the best. Not a high ceiling, but a pretty high floor. And Brendan Sullivan, he has legs and was athletic and did not have a good supporting cast at Northwestern and still performed at a pretty serviceable level. And I think now with Tim Lester as the offensive coordinator, there'll be better coaching, there'll be better schematics, and Iowa's offense has just been so bad that it can't get any worse. But it is still by a mile a weakness on this team, and it will be one of the weaker offenses in the Big Ten just because it will take so much time to undo the damage that Brian Ferentz did. The wide receiver room is a perfect example of this. It's their second crippling weakness, and I think it will actually be weaker than the quarterback room this year, but that's just my personal opinion. The evidence probably says quarterback still has more questions than wide receiver. They do not have a returning wide receiver with 250 yards receiving from last year. They don't. Nico Reganey was their leading receiver, and he's gone. So this receiver room has a ton of questions. The tight end room is going to have to step up. There's a similar theme with many Big Ten schools, whether it's Michigan or Penn State, with much better receiver rooms than Iowa, but where the tight end rooms are much stronger in the Big Ten than the wide receiver rooms are. And it's ironic because it's really the inverse of every former Pac-12 school outside of UCLA, where USC, Oregon, and Washington are going to have good receiver rooms. USC's and Oregon's will be elite, but the tight end rooms for all of those schools outside of Oregon and definitely UCLA are actually weak spots. So I do find that interesting. It shows how the Big Ten is built versus other conferences, especially one like the Pac-12 that's been more offensively focused. Rest in peace to the Pac-12. The Hawkeyes don't have many weaknesses because tight end is strong, the offensive line with how much they return is going to be strong, and running back I wouldn't classify as weak. I wouldn't. It could be a weak link, but I think that's probably the most neutral position on this team. It all depends on whether they can all stay healthy and take steps forward with the amount of collective experience that they have. Now, let's circle back to the defense one last time. The Iowa Hawkeyes on defense returned 86% of their 2023 production, and they only allowed 14.8 points per game last year. And in 2022, they only allowed 13.3 points per game, and they played Michigan and Ohio State, two college football playoff teams, and top three teams in the country, with Georgia being number one that year. In my opinion, they played two of the top three teams, an elite offense, the best in the country in Ohio State, and a top 10 offense in Michigan. And yeah, even so, they allowed less than 2 touchdowns per game in 2022. And last year, their offense was even worse. They played Penn State in the regular season. had a ton of fluke turnovers, awful special teams performance, an even worse offensive performance than one could typically imagine. Got shut out there, shut out by Michigan, shut out by Tennessee, and they still only allowed 14.8 points per game. And last year's defense was, per Bill Connolly's S&P Plus, more efficient than the 2022 Iowa defense. And to a certain degree, I could buy that because the special teams for Iowa last year and the offense was worse than in 2022. And yet, the defense performed admirably. You also have to remember that Iowa's bowl opponent in 2023 in Tennessee was much more competent and put together than their bowl opponent in 2022, Kentucky, who they shut out 21-0. And since 2016, no Iowa defense, and by 16 I mean the beginning of 2016, no Iowa defense has allowed more than 19.9 points per game. In total, this defense returns 807 tackles, 20.5 sacks, 7 forced fumbles, 38 passes defended, and 8 interceptions. And 8 of the 11 projected starters are seniors or graduates. So this unit is experienced. This is the year, I am telling you right now, for Iowa's defense to be generational, all-time great. It could be, and I think will be, the best defense. This is even with losing Cooper DeJean. The best defense of Phil Parker's time at Iowa. And that combined with an offense that also returns a lot of production, has a better quarterback room, will have a better offensive line because of added depth and better experience, and still having an easy schedule on top of all of these things, Iowa's defense will lead this team to the playoff because the defense's supporting cast improves. It's more likely than you think that Iowa can make the playoff. Plus 650 odds, I think, is amazing value. I have never placed a bet yet. I'm not telling you to even bet your own money on this, but I think there is value there. And it is usually unsustainable to win several close games, but Iowa is 11-5 in one-score games since 2021. And if you extend that all the way back to 2016, they're above 500. And more recently, they've had a better knack at winning those one-score games because their defense has been so good and so clutch, same with their special teams. And I imagine that with the defense bringing back so much and probably improving, and with the offense likely improving, they'll probably not have as many one-score games to play in. They'll be more dominant, and when they do play in one-score games, they'll have better options and more diverse ways of attacking, and therefore winning those games. Their probability of winning those games will increase. On top of their recent history of winning close games, the offense will improve, and so will the defense. The only area where I would expect to drop off is special teams because Torrey Taylor was just that good. But not to worry. I think Rice Dakin will be good at that position. Drew Stevens comes back. Caden Wetjen returns as the kick and punt returner. This team is not necessarily better than you think in terms of power rankings, but in terms of on-the-field results, in terms of the capacity to win, they are better and they are infinitely more efficient than you and even myself likely think. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I want to shout out my Patreon members. Thanks to Crash2488 and Braska Rascal for being Heisman members and sponsoring this video and channel. Thanks to Chris Lane, Connor Little OH, and Ismar for sponsoring this video and channel as all-American members. And thanks to John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, and Janisha Cockrell for sponsoring this video and channel as all conference members. Have a great day, guys, and I will see you all soon. Bye-bye.